This video I'm doing is just out of special interest, really. It's a customer's car that turns out to have a problem with the valve gear and with bending push rods. To give you a bit of a backstory on this, the car came in not starting very well when it was warm, and it wasn't really running that great anyway. It had a mega squirt system on, a really early one. The first version of the ECM was in it. It was a really early version, and the whole installation was pretty bad. It was not worth trying to fix or deal with. So what I did, I put on these carburetors off the good parts, and I bought the triple carburetor setup, the manifold, because I didn't have a manifold. I managed to find 3 carburetors for it that were pretty matched, and I put those on the car. Started the car up, and the rocker cover had a gasket sticking out the side of it, so I was expecting oil to leak out of the hole in the gasket, which it didn't. I thought, typical Triumph. So I took the cover off and ran the car to see if there was a problem with oil getting out. Of course there wasn't enough. But what I also noticed was there were 3 bent push rods, and I've got them over here on the bench. These are my 3 bent push rods. If I lay them out on the bench, you can see already this one's trying to get away. You can see it's totally bent, and even on the edge of it here you can see where it's got marks on it. So obviously I've got to replace these, but the whole trick is to find out why it's bent. So what I need to do now is discover why the push rods are bending, because it's a mechanical thing. Push rods don't just bend, they get bent, so something does it to them. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take off the carburetors because of what I know now, which I haven't explained yet, but what I know is I'm going to have to take the cylinder head off. So what I'm going to do is remove all the carburetors that I've got here, because I have to take them off anyway, undo the water pump, that stuff, pull it all out of the way, but then I'll show you what I've discovered with the valve train, and why the push rods are bending, and a few other problems I've got with this as well. So I'm just going to remove the carburetors, and then I can take a better shot for you to show you what I've discovered. Now I have the carburetors and the intake manifolds off. So the other thing that I did to find out where the problem was with the push rod that was bent, I took all the rocker shaft off, and I removed all the push rods, and I put a straight push rod back in where the one and the cylinder that was bent. When I cranked it over by hand, I could feel the resistance on it, and I could feel it locking up. When I looked at all the springs on here, they were fine. None of them were coil bound. But as you know, or may not know, Triumphs have double springs. So what I did, I took off the outer spring and left the inner spring in where I could see it. So as I turn it around now, as I turn it and crank it down, I just do it by hand, you can see as it goes down that the spring gets totally compressed, and you can confirm that, which, in case you don't believe your eyes here, if you put a feeler gauge in the spring and then you crank it down, you can't get the feeler gauge out. So it's completely coil bound on the spring. So that's where my problem is. So obviously now I have to look at the valve springs. So the next thing I did was to make sure that I didn't have some kind of weird camshaft in it that was lifting really high. So I left a push rod in, I put my dial gauge on it, zeroed it out, and now as I turn it, you can see that's 100, 200, so it's just a stock cam in it. There's nothing really crazy in there, so that's not the problem. It's just the fact it's getting coil bound on the inner spring. It's not lifting too high. So the other thing is now as I put a straight edge on the top of the valves, you'll see that all the valves are at different heights, or most of them are. You can see there's a space in between them, which they're not supposed to be. They're all supposed to be the same height, which is not good. Now what you'll notice is most of the exhaust ones are higher than the inlet one, so that would suggest the seats are sunk and somebody's ground the seats in too far and let the valves come out. But I'm going to take the head off and have a look and have it all redone. Now the other thing is, I took the springs off. Once I took the springs off complete off the motor, and I took a look at them, and those are the size of those. Then I got a stock set of springs out of my inventory, and when I compare them, the one to the other, you can see the difference in the size there, and also in the bigger ones, there's more coils in the one that was on the car than there is on the stock one. It's slightly smaller. Now on the TR6s, on the inner spring, there's a collar that goes on the bottom to lift the spring up, because the spring is a different height to the other. The collar makes up this amount. When this spring was fitted from the current one, the one that's coil bound, this one was put on top of the space as well. So I actually made the spring up here somewhere. Even though there's more coils in it, and it's a different style of spring as well. I don't know where these came from. I don't know. I don't really care. They're getting tossed. I'm just putting the stock springs in because that's what the camshaft is. And that's all the camshaft needs. So now I'm going to take the head off and have a look at the height of the seats, because I think that's a bit of a problem. All the valves should be the same. Anyway, that's it for now. I've taken the cylinder head off the motor, got it on the bench. In the meantime, I've cleaned all the surfaces. I've cleaned all the surface head block. I've had all the studs out, cleaned all the threads, everything else, cleaned the studs themselves. So this is all ready to go. I'm ready to put the cylinder head back on that. I got a few issues with the cylinder head that I've found. Not only the springs binding, but a reason for them binding, completely different to what I thought. Okay, so we'll go and have a look at that. Took the cylinder head off, I stripped all the head, took all the valves out of it, took the springs off, found more problems with the head, why the push rods were bending. First of all, we've got to look at the guides. Somebody put a steel guide in it, which is okay. Personally, I prefer phosphor bronze for different reasons. I always put phosphor bronze in. The size of the steel one was the generic machine shop type guide. Just buy it in big long tubes, cut it off, throw it in the head. That's the size it's supposed to be. As you can see, it's slightly larger. The problem was the guy, whoever did the head, put this long guide, the exhaust guide, they put it in the inlet tract. So the inlet is supposed to be that long, which is even shorter than the exhaust, and that's because to allow gas flow to go through the head or through the port. So I've done it on here. I've put one guide in here, there's a brass one, and then the other one I put the steel one. The steel one's left in that was original, that was in the head when I got it. So you can see half the ports, a good deal of the ports blocked out with the guide. I don't understand anybody putting that in and not noticing. Now the second thing was the valves. Not only did they put the exhaust guide in the inlet tract, they also used the wrong valve. They put the valve out of the early head, which has got a bigger head on it than the later one that's got the step block in it. This one's got the step block. So it's a later motor, it should have the smaller valve in. When you look at it, the difference between the two isn't huge. To the layman, I suppose, it just looks like it doesn't really matter. Well, it does. If you measure it, there's quite a bit. I can't remember the measurements off the top of my head. I'm getting too old for that. So the valve that was in it was sat inside the exhaust, and it came up short on the bottom. When you put the new one in, that's the correct one, the correct size, it sits further down on the seat, so it comes in further. So the problem that I had when my valves were the same level wasn't what I presumed it was, which it would be normally, where the intake valve had sunk and gone further into the head and so moved up. That wasn't the problem. My inlet valves are in the correct position. Well, the problem was this idiot put the wrong valves in the exhaust, so now he's moved the exhaust down. The valve is down compared to where it's supposed to be. And that's going to not help at all with the coil bound with the springs, as I explained with the springs. So the whole thing is a series of cock-ups, right from the guy putting the wrong valves in and then putting the wrong guides in the intake and blocking it. So the whole thing's a bit of a, well, I haven't got to swear. So what I'm going to do is put the head back together properly and put it back on the car, and we'll start from there, and we won't bend push rods anymore, and we'll have a proper inlet track that's actually able to breathe properly. So anyway, that's where I'm at with it. So that's what I'm going to do. So I have the cylinder head back on the engine, and as you can see, we'll just take a look now. You can see that all the valves are the same height, which is what we wanted in the first place, which was our mistake. So now I'm just going to carry on, put everything back together, and fire the thing up. So I'm just checking the pressure on my cooling system. I've just topped it up, so I'm okay. I'm not losing pressure, and I'm not appearing to be pissing anything out, so that's good. So we'll just take this off. What I've also had to do is on the alternator, I had to change the alternator for a Lucas one. The other one was a Delco one. Didn't fit properly, wasn't mounted properly. And of course the connection on the end was all hacked up, so I had to put a new plug on, solder that in as well. So what I'm going to do is start the engine up now, and to make sure the alternator is working, I've got my voltmeter connected up. Or I did have. Yeah, got my voltmeter connected up. See what happens, and we'll see what happens when I start the car. Okay, we have the ignition on. I'm actually back to square one before I found the bent push rods. But anyway. You can see how much oil I've got coming out of here. So you can see I've got lots of oil coming out of the top end. So what I'm going to do is put the rocker cover back on, fit the air filters I've got for it, and we'll send it back to the guy that owns it. He can put back on what he took off, which is all his seats, his lights, some of his other bits and pieces. Okay, so that's it. He's got his 3 carburetors. He's happening. Alright. So I've basically finished everything that I was set out to do. I've got the 3 carburetors on it. I've put all the rocker cover back on. I got his air filters on. He's going back to the owner to put the stuff back on that he took off, as I said before. The vent over the front of the radiator. There's just 1 or 2 things I'd like to mention. You can see how this job went completely all wrong, and a lot more work than what I anticipated, just putting on 3 carburetors and taking the other crap system off. I end up taking the head off and fixing all kinds of stuff that somebody else just made a stupid mistake. And anyway, one of the other things I'd like to mention, the bypass that I put on from the main oil seal, from the main oil gallery on the bottom of the block and back up to the cylinder head to bypass the internal oilways, has definitely increased for sure the amount of oil that's going up to the top end. So one of the byproducts of that is going to be that I'm going to get too much oil inside the valve guides. They're going to come down the guides. I'm going to be burning oil, or could be burning oil. So when I did their head, I anticipated that, and I put valve oil seals on top of the guides. Whether it will be enough or not, because quite frankly, I'm surprised how much oil I'm getting up there. Whether it will be enough or not, time will tell. I think it will be okay. So another thing about the 3 carburetors, putting the carburetors on, when you crank the engine, The Lucas originally is not the fastest cranking motors in the world, but these constant depression carburetors need to have a good airflow through them to make them work, to be able to pull the gas in. It's not like an American carburetor where it's got a fuel pump, an accelerated pump on it, where you just pump it a bit and get a lot of gas in and it'll fire up no matter what. It's not a Chevy. It's the kind of carburetor it needs air to go through it. So if the engine is cranking slowly due to a bad battery or a low battery or a starter that's not performing as it should, the car won't start. You need to crank them quickly. This problem is exacerbated, made even worse by putting 3 carburetors on, because now you've got even less airflow. The same amount of air is going into the engine, but now it's going through 3 carburetors instead of 2. So the draw through it is a lot slower or a lot lower than a twin carb one. Just the same as it'd be faster if there's one. So I put a battery on it that cranks better. The battery that was on it didn't have enough cranking amps. It was getting tired anyway. So I put a new battery on it so it cranks fairly quickly now. So that's hopefully alleviated that. You can buy one of the fast cranking starter motors that will go on it. The new type, the high torque ones, and they seem to spin the engine a lot faster. So if I had a problem with this not starting or too slow all the time, I'd stick one of them on it. Anyway, the final thing I'd like to point out is if you buy a car that's been restored already, make sure you get the bills for it. Make sure you find out who did it. And if it's a wannabe restorer that in his past life did something completely different to restoring cars, not a good idea to buy the car, because they make mistakes that are really bad. Having said that, I've got some customers that have restored cars to really high standards and done really well, but those are usually the guys that talk to me. Anyway, so when you buy a car, have a look at all the invoices and see who they are. If there's no invoices or only invoices for parts, I'd get worried. I need to know the guy that qualified it, because technically if you're buying the car and you're paying good bucks for it, you're paying the guy to have done the work. And if you were doing it on a workshop thing, you'd be a bit more critical than just walking around it and kicking the tires. So bear that in mind where the car's restored and who restored it, and get the documentation. The biggest problems I have is cars that have been restored by other people. That's it. I spend 90% of my time fixing them. Anyway, so that's about it. This can go back to the owner, and that'll be it. So that's it. That's 2 videos out of 1 that I didn't intend to make. The other one's about putting the carburetors on. Right, that's it.